Silver Lake, Wisconsin. A town so small you could drive through it in 7 minutes flat and still have time to wave at the gas station clerk on your way out. People here leave their cars unlocked, bake pies for church fundraisers, and think they know every secret worth knowing. But one November evening, that illusion cracked, quietly, like a mirror under pressure, when a 20-year-old grocery clerk named Madison Hale simply vanished. It started as the kind of cold Midwestern day that makes you dream of coffee and flannel. Madison had just finished her shift at Miller's Market, the local store where the shelves always smell faintly of oranges and bleach. She clocked out at 6:15 p.m., waved to the manager, and headed toward her small silver sedan parked under a flickering street lamp. In her pocket was a folded note, a list of things she wanted to do before the year ended: apply for community college, buy her dad a new fishing rod, and, right at the bottom, tell Ryan I'm ready. Ryan Cooper had been her co-worker once, and for a while, her everything. They'd broken up that fall but kept orbiting each other, tangled in that gray zone between affection and awkwardness. Madison planned to talk to him that night, not about love, not exactly, but about closure. Her aunt and uncle were away on a cruise, and Madison had promised to house-sit their cozy place out in Cedar Hollow, a patch of suburbia that backed up against the Pinewood Reserve Forest. She liked the quiet there, the kind of silence where you could hear snow settling on the porch railings. That afternoon, she texted Ryan. Change of plans. Come to the house if you want. Bring those DVDs. Ryan replied with a thumbs-up emoji. By 7:30 p.m., he was pulling up to the address, a single-story ranch house with Christmas lights still dangling from last year. But the place was dark. The porch light was off, and Madison's car wasn't in the driveway. He knocked. Waited. No answer. He called her cell, it rang twice, then went to voicemail. He left a message, something simple like, "Hey, I'm here. You okay?" Nothing. So he sat in his car, engine idling, watching his breath fog the windshield. 30 minutes passed. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Madison. Plans changed again. I'll see you tomorrow, promise. No explanation. No location. Ryan figured maybe she'd gone out with friends, or maybe she was second-guessing their talk. He didn't push it. He turned the car around, the tires crunching against frozen gravel, and drove home. That was the last confirmed communication anyone ever received from Madison Hale. The next morning, Ryan sent a couple of texts, no response. By noon, he called. Straight to voicemail. By evening, worry was gnawing at the edges of logic. He reached out to Madison's father, Tom Hale, who initially tried to stay calm. Madison was responsible, yes, but she was 20, independent, private. Maybe she'd taken a drive, he said. Maybe her phone died. Still, as the sky darkened, the unease grew thicker. When the porch lights across town started flicking on one by one, Madison's house stayed dark. At 9 p.m., Ryan drove back out to Cedar Hollow, bringing along Madison's cousin, Aaron. They circled the property, peered through the windows, and called her name into the November air. No sound but the rustling trees. Inside, the curtains hung still. A light breeze moved a wind chime on the porch, playing a tune that felt far too gentle for the dread in their stomachs. Aaron tried the front door. Locked. The back door. Locked too. Ryan crouched to look through the kitchen window. Everything seemed neat, a folded blanket on the couch, a mug in the sink. Nothing looked wrong, and that somehow made it worse. By midnight, word had spread through Silver Lake. Volunteers started driving loops through nearby roads, scanning ditches and parking lots. Some carried flashlights, others faith. The following afternoon, a friend spotted something on the side of a county road near Pinewood Reserve, Madison's silver sedan. It was parked neatly on the gravel shoulder, doors unlocked, keys missing. Inside, her purse, a jacket, and a half-empty water bottle. No sign of struggle. No footprints in the thin layer of frost. Detective Laura Briggs, the lead investigator, arrived within the hour. She'd seen plenty of runaways, even more lovers' quarrels. But something about this one felt off. Everything was too tidy, too arranged, like someone had pressed rewind and erased the chaos. Briggs ordered a canvass of the area and sent officers to question Madison's family. Meanwhile, Ryan showed up at the station voluntarily. He told her everything, the texts, the waiting, the last message at 8 p.m. He even handed over his phone for analysis. Briggs noted how calm he seemed. Too calm, maybe. Ryan had nothing to hide, but in small towns, calm often reads as guilt. 2 days later, a search warrant was issued for the Cedar Hollow house. Madison's uncle, still out of state, gave permission to enter. Officers broke the lock on the side door just before sunset. The air inside was cold and faintly sweet, the smell of scented candles long blown out. They moved room by room, kitchen clear, living room untouched, bedroom bed neatly made. Then they opened the basement door. A staircase of narrow wooden steps led into darkness. A single pull-string bulb flickered above, revealing a scene that froze every officer in place. In the far corner sat Madison Hale, motionless in a chair, a small dark wound just above her right temple. The gunshot had been quick, clean, and close. No weapon was found. Detective Briggs called it in, then stood there a moment longer, taking in the details, the overturned coffee mug on the floor, the faint drag mark in the dust near her feet, the pair of zip ties lying open beside the chair, and the absence of any blood spatter on the walls. It looked staged. Too precise. Whoever did this hadn't panicked. They'd taken their time. By dawn, Cedar Hollow was sealed off with yellow tape. Reporters gathered at the corner diner, waiting for details. Locals whispered theories, robbery, jealousy, a stranger passing through. But to Briggs, one question echoed louder than all the rest. If Madison was shot in that house, why was her car left 2 miles away? She went back over the evidence, no forced entry, valuables untouched, missing items oddly specific, a camera, 3 kitchen knives, a small pistol, a bottle of perfume, and some cash. Yet gold jewelry sat in plain view on a dresser. Nothing fit. It was as if the killer wanted them to notice the theft, to believe a motive that wasn't there. Meanwhile, Ryan sat through hours of questioning. He repeated the same story until his voice rasped. He hadn't seen Madison alive that night. The last message was from her phone. He didn't know where she went. Still, suspicion lingered. He was the boyfriend, the last known contact, the easy answer. Detective Briggs knew public pressure could crush an investigation. She'd seen it before, a narrative hardened too early, evidence bent to fit. But she also knew something about Ryan's eyes, the confusion there didn't look practiced. She ordered a full forensic sweep. Skin cells, fingerprints, shoe prints, trace fibers. She'd need them all, because deep down, she could already feel that this case was going to get darker before it got any clearer. Morning came to Silver Lake with the kind of gray light that makes everything feel colder than it should. The frost on the windowpanes looked like veins branching across glass, silent, delicate, impossible to ignore. For Detective Laura Briggs, that morning started with coffee strong enough to burn, a stack of notes from the previous night, and the echo of a single unanswered question. If Madison Hale was killed in the Cedar Hollow house, why was her car found miles away? The timeline didn't add up, and in investigations like this, timelines are sacred. Every minute you can't account for becomes a hole the truth might be hiding in. Briggs had been on the force for 17 years. She wasn't the type to be swayed by headlines or small-town gossip. But she also knew how quickly a case could twist once emotion and panic started driving the story instead of evidence. And Silver Lake was already twisting. By the time the morning radio began reading the weather, half the town believed Ryan Cooper had done it. He was the boyfriend. He was the last to see her, or at least, to hear from her. That was enough for people who wanted a villain before breakfast. But Briggs wasn't so sure. She sat in her office staring at the printed text message on her desk, the last one Madison had sent. Plans changed again. See you tomorrow. No punctuation, no emojis, no typos. Too clean. Too composed for Madison's usual texting style, which was full of abbreviations and exclamation marks. It felt off, like someone trying to be her. Meanwhile, Ryan was sitting in an interrogation room, hands folded tight, eyes red from a night without sleep. He'd already told the story 3 times. He drove to the house. He waited. She texted him to go home. He did. Briggs believed most of it. But believing wasn't enough. Ryan, she said gently, is there any chance someone else could have used her phone that night? He shook his head. No. She had it on her all the time. I swear, I never saw her after that text. Anyone who might have wanted to hurt her. Anyone following her, bothering her. Again, he said no. Then, quietly, I think she wanted to break up with me for good. Briggs wrote that down but didn't underline it. Too many investigators underline things that fit their hunches and ignore the rest. She'd learned to let the facts breathe first. By mid-morning, forensic teams were combing the Hale property. Every drawer, every doorknob, every inch of carpet was dusted for prints. In the basement, where Madison's body had been found, the evidence techs discovered a strange pattern of footprints, 1 pair of sneakers, 1 pair of boots, both partially overlapping. It wasn't clear which came first. Then came another oddity, 2 separate DNA profiles on the zip ties that had been cut and discarded near the chair. One belonged to Madison. The other, unknown. Not Ryan's. Briggs felt her pulse quicken. Unknown DNA meant someone else had been there. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the photographs spread across the table, the silver sedan near Pinewood Reserve, the cold basement, the chair, the faint drag marks in the dust. None of it looked like Ryan Cooper's doing. He was young, impulsive, emotional. But whoever staged this scene was deliberate, patient. Someone who didn't just kill, but planned to mislead. Later that day, Briggs joined a small team to re-examine the car. It was still parked at the impound lot, glistening faintly under the weak sunlight. She opened the driver's door carefully, breathing in the faint scent of cherry air freshener and something else, gun oil. Bag the floor mat, she told the evidence tech. And check the pedals. I want every trace particle. In the back seat sat Madison's tote bag. Inside, a notebook filled with grocery lists, 1 half-read paperback novel, and a single hair tie wrapped tight around a pen. Briggs noted it all. It wasn't what was there that bothered her, it was what wasn't. No phone. No keys. No sign she'd ever planned to leave the house that night. When she returned to the station, the first lab report was waiting on her desk. The results from the polygraph Ryan had volunteered for. He'd passed. Not perfectly, there were spikes of stress when he talked about finding out she'd died, but that was normal. People forget that guilt and grief look the same on a monitor. Still, the department's mood shifted. Some officers muttered that Briggs was going soft. Others whispered that Ryan had fooled the test. Briggs ignored them. Her instincts were stronger than their gossip. She'd seen guilty men lie through their teeth and innocent ones break down under pressure. Ryan didn't fit either pattern. He looked lost. By nightfall, snow began to fall again, dusting the streets of Silver Lake in pale white silence. Briggs stood outside the precinct, cigarette between her fingers, though she hadn't lit one in years. She stared at the glowing windows of the town across the lake, the diners, the stores, the faint reflection of Christmas lights on icy water. She couldn't shake the feeling that whoever killed Madison was still close. Maybe even someone who'd watched the search parties drive by, blending in, invisible in plain sight. 2 days later, another report arrived, this one from Madison's bank. At 10:07 p.m. on the night she vanished, $300 had been withdrawn from her account at an ATM in a town 30 miles east. Then another withdrawal the next morning, same amount, different location. Briggs compared the timestamps. The first withdrawal happened 7 minutes after Ryan's phone had connected to a cell tower near his friend's house. He couldn't have been in both places. Whoever took that cash, she murmured, was using her card, and wanted us to know it. She requested the ATM footage. Hours later, it arrived, grainy, black and white, timestamped 10 hours 7 minutes and 36 seconds. A tall figure approached the machine, wearing a dark hooded jacket. No visible face. But behind him, parked under a streetlight, was a white pickup truck. Briggs froze the frame. Not Ryan's car. Something new had entered the story, a ghost with a vehicle. The following morning, she brought Ryan back in, not as a suspect this time, but as a witness. She showed him the photo. "Do you recognize the truck?" He squinted, shaking his head. "No. I've never seen it." "Think. Anyone Madison knew who drove something like this?" He hesitated. "Her cousin Aaron's ex maybe. Or that guy she met through work. I don't know. She didn't talk about other people much." "Okay," Briggs said, leaning back. "But she wasn't the kind to just hand someone her bank card, was she?" He frowned. "No. Never." That single word, never, hung in the air longer than it should have. That evening, Briggs drove out to Pinewood Reserve herself. The road wound through trees that looked like dark sentinels under the moonlight. She parked by the spot where the car had been found. The wind was sharp, the kind that slices straight through wool. She stepped into the clearing, flashlight beam gliding across the ground. There, tire impressions in the mud, faint but parallel to the road. One set matched the sedan. The other, larger, heavier, a truck's. She knelt down, brushed a gloved hand across the frozen dirt. The imprint was clean. Recent. Briggs exhaled, watching her breath swirl in the cold air. "White pickup," she whispered to herself. "Who the hell were you?" Back in Silver Lake, the lights in Ryan's small apartment were still on. He sat by the window, staring at his phone, scrolling through old messages from Madison. The last one glowed at the bottom of the screen, plans changed again. "See you tomorrow." He read it once, twice, 100 times, searching for something, a tone, a word, a clue. But it was just pixels now. The voice behind it gone. Somewhere outside, a snowplow rumbled down Main Street, clearing the path but leaving behind long, dark streaks, like evidence smeared across the road. And for Detective Briggs, the case was just beginning to thaw open. The text that changed everything wasn't the end of Madison Hale's story. It was the start of a trail, one that led into the shadows of a quiet town that had never really been quiet at all. The smell of cold earth and bleach lingered long after the basement had been cleared. Even with the crime scene tape gone, Cedar Hollow felt wrong. A house that once held the soft hum of an ordinary life now carried the silence of something unfinished. For Detective Laura Briggs, silence was never empty. It was heavy. It held the truth. 3 days after Madison Hale's body was found, Briggs returned to the house alone. The press had lost interest for the moment, too few details, no new suspects. The neighbors kept their distance. Only the hum of wind through bare trees filled the air as she unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust floated in the light slicing through half-drawn curtains. The house was tidy, almost staged. A folded blanket, untouched mail, a bowl of fruit already going soft. Every detail whispered that Madison had never expected anything to go wrong. Briggs switched on her recorder. "Silver Lake Case 2041, she said quietly. "Secondary walk-through, detective's notes." She moved toward the basement. Each step creaked like it was warning her away. But detectives don't turn from the quiet, they dig into it. The basement light flickered as she pulled the cord. The air was thick and still, carrying the faint chemical tang of forensic dusting powder. Against the far wall, the folding chair sat exactly where it had been found. Around it, a halo of white marker dots indicated every trace the evidence team had already collected: fibers, hair, fragments of tape. Briggs crouched beside the chair. A faint outline remained on the floor, an arc of dust disturbed in a shape too round to ignore. She reached for her notebook. Possible bucket or container, placed after death, she murmured. Maybe to catch something, or to stage. Staging. That word had followed this case from the beginning. The position of the body, the missing weapon, the odd list of stolen items, it all pointed to someone trying too hard to create a story. Outside, the day turned from gray to pale gold. The winter sun barely warmed the window glass, but Briggs stayed until every corner was logged and photographed again. As she packed up, her phone buzzed, a text from the lab. New DNA trace found, not matching Ryan Cooper. She didn't smile. Not yet. But something inside her steadied. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere had changed. The chief wanted progress. The media had begun to ask questions again. "You've got the boyfriend, don't you?" one reporter shouted outside the station. Briggs said nothing. She wasn't about to let headlines steer the investigation. She poured herself another coffee and stared at the evidence board. Ryan Cooper's photo was pinned near the center. Around it, Madison's last text, the ATM footage, the photo of the white pickup truck, and now a label in red ink, "Unknown male DNA." She traced the thread between them with her finger. "Who are you?" she whispered. That afternoon, she met with forensic analyst Jordan Pierce in the lab. The hum of refrigeration units filled the sterile room. Pierce pointed at a magnified photo on his monitor. This came from the underside of the table in the basement, tiny skin flakes. Male, not Ryan. Partial profile only, but definitely not related to Madison either. Could it match the zip tie residue? Pierce nodded slowly. Working on it. But here's the interesting part, trace fibers on those ties aren't from clothing like denim or fleece. They're from nylon rope. Industrial type. You'd see it in things like hunting gear or truck bed straps. Briggs frowned. So he's not just someone passing through. He's someone who works with that stuff. Exactly. By now, Ryan had been released, still under suspicion, but no longer held. He went home to his small apartment on the edge of town, where the blinds stayed shut and the phone never stopped ringing. His parents wanted him to leave Silver Lake. He refused. "I didn't do anything wrong," he told Briggs when she stopped by to check in. His voice cracked slightly, half defiance, half exhaustion. "I know," she said quietly. "But staying won't make this easier. I can't just disappear. Not when everyone already thinks I did it." She studied him for a moment. "Then you'd better be ready when the truth finally shows up." Ryan nodded, though his eyes said he'd lost faith in what truth meant anymore. The next clue arrived from the unlikeliest place, the hardware store in town. A clerk there called in a tip. A man had come in 2 days before Madison's disappearance, buying zip ties, duct tape, and nylon rope. He paid in cash and drove a white pickup. "Did he leave a name?" Briggs asked when she arrived. The clerk shook his head. "But I remember him. Kinda quiet. Blonde, maybe early 30s. Didn't make eye contact." That description could fit half the county. Still, it was something. Briggs pulled up recent local sales on surveillance and scanned through the feeds herself. It took nearly an hour before she saw it, time-stamped November 12, 2 days before the murder. There he was. The man at the counter. Cap pulled low, wearing a green canvas jacket. And behind him, a dented white pickup truck parked near the curb. That image burned itself into her memory. She sent it to the tech team to run plate recognition. Within minutes, they confirmed, the plate was partially visible, 7G to 42K, registered to an out-of-state rental company. The renter's name was Derek Vaughn. Briggs leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She had a name now. Meanwhile, Madison's autopsy report came in. Cause of death, single gunshot wound to the head. Estimated time, between 8:15 and 8:45 p.m. on November 14. The toxicology report was clean, no alcohol, no drugs. But there was one more thing, faint bruising on her wrists consistent with restraint before death, not after. Whoever tied her up wanted control, not theft. That detail ruled out robbery for good. Briggs updated her notes. Killer stayed hours. Removed ties later. Possible attempt to erase DNA. Returned after death. Returned. That word echoed like a cold draft through the room. Someone had the confidence to come back. It was close to midnight when Briggs left the office. The streets of Silver Lake were deserted except for the orange glow of a snowplow moving slow along Main Street. Her reflection followed her in every dark window, tired eyes, trench coat collar raised against the wind, mind still circling the puzzle like a hawk. She drove past Pinewood Reserve, the same road where Madison's car had been found. The forest loomed, black and endless. She pulled over, engine idling, and stepped out. The sound of wind through the pines was almost human, like whispers she couldn't quite catch. She closed her eyes, letting the noise settle into her thoughts. Madison had driven this way hundreds of times. Whoever took her car knew this route, knew where to leave it, knew exactly how long it would take to be found. This wasn't random. It was mapped. Back in the precinct the next morning, Briggs pinned a new photo to the board, a zoomed image of Derek Vaughn at the hardware store. She drew a red line connecting him to the ATM frame showing the white pickup truck. Finally, the web was starting to make sense. Now all she needed was proof that Vaughn had been anywhere near Madison that night. Then came the breakthrough, a partial fingerprint lifted from the perfume bottle missing from the Hale house. Forensics ran it through the national database. The system buzzed with a match in under 10 minutes. Derek Vaughn, prior arrest, petty theft, 2010, Eau Claire County. Briggs stared at the screen, the pale glow lighting up her face. There it was. The first concrete link between the unknown and the dead. But before she could exhale, the chief burst into her office. "We've got a problem," he said. "Media's running with the boyfriend killer story again. They don't care about your new guy until we can prove it." Briggs glanced back at the board, at the face of Madison Hale smiling in her graduation photo. "Then we'd better prove it fast," she said. She turned off the light, leaving the room in half shadow. Because the basement had told its story, and now, it was time to find out who had been listening. The first snow of December came quietly to Silver Lake, slow, gentle flakes drifting across empty streets like ghosts of things unsaid. For Detective Laura Briggs, it wasn't beauty she saw in that snowfall. It was time slipping away. Every hour that passed made the trail colder. But the white pickup truck, that was her thread. And if she could pull it long enough, it might finally unravel the story that began in that quiet basement on Cedar Hollow Lane. 3 days after identifying Derek Vaughn as the rental name on the truck, Briggs sat in her office watching grainy surveillance footage on repeat. She zoomed in frame by frame, Vaughn entering the hardware store, the rope and duct tape on the counter, the license plate barely visible through falling rain. He looked like any working man, worn jacket, baseball cap, the face of someone who could disappear into a crowd without leaving a ripple. Ordinary. Forgettable. And that's what made him dangerous. The database showed Vaughn had moved around the Midwest for years, odd jobs, small thefts, nothing major enough to keep him on anyone's radar. He'd been arrested once for stealing fuel from a construction site in Eau Claire, then vanished. When Briggs checked his last known address, the landlord said he'd left, in a hurry, owing 3 months' rent. He'd driven off in, of course, a white pickup. Left everything behind? Briggs asked. Pretty much, the landlord said, frowning. Except a broken space heater and a pile of old rope in the shed. Back at the precinct, the pressure mounted. The chief wanted a warrant. The prosecutor wanted a confession. The media wanted a headline. But Briggs wanted proof. Real proof, the kind that didn't fall apart in court. She sent the rental paperwork to the forensics team for latent prints and fiber transfer. At the same time, she ordered a GPS data request from the rental company. Hours later, the ping log came through. The truck had traveled from Eau Claire to Silver Lake on November 12, 2 days before Madison Hale's murder. Then, between 8 o'clock and 10 p.m. on November 14, the night Madison died, it had paused for 43 minutes near Cedar Hollow before continuing north toward Pinewood Reserve. Briggs stared at the screen, tracing the route with her pen. Cedar Hollow to Pinewood Reserve. Basement to car. Death to disappearance. It lined up too perfectly to ignore. Still, she knew the department wasn't ready to let go of Ryan Cooper. He was familiar, convenient, and the town had already chosen its villain. That night, she found Ryan sitting alone at the diner, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. The waitress shot Briggs a look, half pity, half warning, before leaving them alone. "You shouldn't be here," Briggs said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I live here," Ryan muttered. "I've got nowhere else to go." "People talk," she replied. "They already did," he said quietly. "They don't stop." Briggs studied him, the faint tremor in his hand, the dark circles under his eyes. He looked more exhausted than guilty. "Ryan," she said finally, "I think we found the man who took Madison's car. Maybe the man who killed her." His head lifted. "You're serious?" She nodded. "But I need you to stay out of sight. If the media catches wind, they'll twist it before we can prove it." For the first time in weeks, Ryan's shoulders seemed to loosen. He whispered, "Do you really think he did it?" "I think he's the first person who makes sense," Briggs said. "And I plan to find him." 2 days later, Vaughn's truck was located, abandoned behind an old service station outside Milwaukee. The engine was cold, the inside empty. But under the seat, the evidence team found something. A single .38 caliber revolver wrapped in a rag. The serial number had been filed off. Briggs watched as the forensics unit carefully bagged it. She knew better than to celebrate early, but her pulse picked up anyway. If that gun matched the bullet from Madison Hale's autopsy, then the ghost finally had a face. The lab worked through the night. Briggs stayed at her desk, her coat draped over her chair, her coffee turning cold beside her. She read the case file over and over until the words blurred. At 3:14 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was the lab tech, Jordan Pierce. His voice was flat, tired, but steady. "The bullet's a match, Laura. That revolver fired it." She leaned back, closing her eyes. The weight of the last 3 weeks lifted, just a little. "Good," she whispered. "Now we find him." But Vaughn was already gone. He'd emptied the last of his accounts, left his motel room in chaos, and driven off sometime the night before the warrant was signed. The trail picked up again across county lines, where a security camera caught his truck at a rest stop, heading west. Briggs wasn't surprised. People like Vaughn didn't stay put, they dissolved. Still, she wasn't giving up. She requested help from the State Bureau, and within 48 hours, they traced his phone's signal bouncing between Wisconsin and Minnesota. Then it stopped cold near a frozen lake outside Rochester. The truck was found there the next morning, parked at the edge of the woods. Inside, only an empty pack of cigarettes and a map of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. No Vaughn. Winter settled harder that week. Silver Lake streets turned slick, the trees bare and black. Briggs drove home one night through the snowfall, headlights slicing through the dark like beams in fog. Her mind replayed every step, every decision. Madison's text. The staged scene. The stolen perfume. The gun. And yet, something still didn't fit. Vaughn hadn't known Madison personally. No connection, no reason. So why her? Why this house? The answer, she suspected, was hidden in something smaller than motive, habit. People like Vaughn didn't kill for passion. They killed because they could. Because opportunity whispered louder than conscience. A week later, new results came in from the FBI database. The DNA from the Hale basement, the same unknown male sample, was a perfect match for Derek Vaughn. Briggs finally allowed herself to exhale. It was over. At least, that's what she thought. Then came the call. It was a local patrol unit out near Pinewood Reserve. They'd picked up movement on a trail camera, a man in a dark coat, carrying a duffel bag, heading toward the old quarry road. Briggs was already in her car before the dispatcher finished the report. When she arrived, the woods were alive with the sound of radios and crunching boots. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. A deputy waved her over. "We found his campsite," he said. "Looks like he'd been here a while." Briggs stepped into the clearing. A small tent sagged under the weight of snow. A burned-out fire pit lay beside it, ashes still warm. Inside the tent were scraps of food wrappers, a half-empty water jug, and one more thing, a crumpled photo. It was Madison Hale. Her high school graduation picture, folded and creased from handling. Briggs stared at it for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "He's not running from what he did. He's revisiting it." The search went on for 3 more days. Helicopters swept the woods, dogs tracked the frozen ground, and every radio frequency buzzed with updates. Finally, just before dawn on the 4th day, a trooper spotted him. Vaughn was walking along the riverbank, pale and hollow-eyed, his breath visible in the cold. When he saw the flashing lights, he didn't run. He just stopped, raised his hands, and said, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." By sunrise, Briggs stood watching as they loaded him into the cruiser. Snow kept falling, erasing the footprints almost as soon as they appeared. Ryan Cooper's name would soon be cleared. Madison Hale's family would finally know the truth. But for Briggs, it wasn't victory she felt, only relief mixed with something like exhaustion. Because in Silver Lake, every answer came with a cost. And the basement at Cedar Hollow had given her the truth she'd been chasing, a truth that would follow her long after the snow melted.
Snow still covered Silver Lake like a shroud, muffling every sound. To most of the town, winter meant quiet. To Detective Laura Briggs, quiet meant danger. The noise had stopped, but the story hadn't. Derek Vaughn sat behind bars now, the man in the white pickup, the drifter whose fingerprints matched the rope, whose gun had fired the bullet that ended Madison Hale's life. Everyone thought that meant closure. But to Briggs, it only raised one more question. If Vaughn was the killer, why was Ryan Cooper still wearing an ankle monitor? The interrogation room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Briggs had been in that room 1,000 times, but tonight it felt different, colder, heavier. Vaughn sat across from her, wrists cuffed loosely to the table, expression calm in a way that unsettled her more than anger ever could. He looked smaller than she expected, thinner, almost tired. His voice was gravelly but soft when he finally spoke. "I told you before, Detective. I didn't plan any of it." Briggs kept her tone measured. "But you were there." "I was," he said. "But it wasn't supposed to happen like that." Outside the viewing glass, the chief watched silently. The prosecutor wanted something clear, something that could fit into a headline. But Briggs wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing truth, and truth rarely fit in a straight line. She slid a photo across the table, Madison smiling, graduation gown swaying in sunlight. "You knew her?" Vaughn hesitated, eyes flicking toward the photo. "No, not really. Saw her once, maybe twice." "Where?" He shrugged. "Gas station. Grocery store. Town small." "So why her? Why that night?" His gaze dropped. "Because the door was open." Briggs leaned forward slightly. You broke in. He shook his head. No. I mean, it was already open. She let that hang in the air. The recorder's red light blinked steadily. Are you saying someone else was there first? Silence. Then, slowly, Vaughn nodded. Briggs' pulse ticked faster, but she didn't show it. Who? I don't know his name, Vaughn said. You think I'm lying, but I saw a guy walking out when I pulled up. He got into a dark car, maybe blue, maybe black. Didn't even look at me. Briggs folded her arms. You expect me to believe you just walked into a house with someone leaving? I was just looking for a place to crash, Vaughn murmured. Didn't mean to hurt nobody. She surprised me when I got inside. You brought a gun. His voice dropped lower. I didn't mean to use it. Later that night, Briggs replayed the recording again and again. Vaughn's tone was too calm, his story too convenient. But there was one detail that caught her attention: the car. Every report had said Madison's neighbor saw nothing, but no one had ever asked about cars. Briggs sent 2 patrol officers back to Cedar Hollow, asking them to canvass the street again. At 9 p.m., one of them called. We found an old woman who thinks she saw a dark sedan parked across the road that night. She didn't think much of it then. Briggs felt the old electricity of a case refusing to settle. Meanwhile, Ryan Cooper was trying to rebuild what was left of his life. The ankle monitor itched like guilt he couldn't wash off. Every store clerk, every passerby looked at him as if he was something fragile or dangerous. They couldn't decide which. When Briggs visited his apartment again, he didn't bother pretending to be okay. They say you got him, Ryan said. The guy with the truck. So why am I still locked down? Because the prosecutor's office hasn't cleared you yet, she said gently. The paperwork takes time. Ryan gave a short laugh that didn't sound like laughter. 14 months of time, detective. 14 months of being a murderer in a town that won't forget. Briggs nodded slowly. Then help me finish this. You remember any dark sedans near Madison's house that week? He frowned, thinking. Yeah, actually, maybe. Couple nights before it happened, there was a car parked near her aunt's driveway. Thought it was her cousin's friend or something. You see the driver? No, just headlights when it pulled away. By morning, Briggs had enough to reopen the timeline. She mapped out every known movement, Ryan's phone data, Madison's final text, Vaughn's GPS trail, and now, the unidentified sedan. She pinned the map on the wall. The red strings stretched across like arteries of truth. In the middle, she added one word: why? Because that was the piece that still didn't fit. Vaughn's confession was full of holes. He admitted being there, admitted firing the gun, but denied knowing her or planning it. The motive was missing, and without motive, the story was a shadow. 2 weeks later, the forensics team processed the revolver again, this time checking for secondary prints. Under the layer of Vaughn's handling, they found something else, a partial thumbprint belonging to an unknown male. Not Ryan. Not Vaughn. Someone else had touched that gun before it fired. When Briggs received the report, she sat perfectly still. Her coffee went cold beside her hand. Someone gave him the weapon, she whispered. Or planted it. She drove straight to the county jail. Vaughn was in a standard orange jumpsuit, thinner now, but his eyes were clear. Derek, she said as she sat down, how'd you get the gun? He blinked, confused. What? The revolver. Where did it come from? He hesitated. Found it in the house. Where in the house? On the table. Beside a purse. Briggs leaned in. That gun wasn't hers. You're telling me you just happened to walk into a house and find a loaded gun sitting next to her purse? His jaw flexed. I told you. I didn't plan it. She studied him for a long moment. He wasn't lying, not exactly. But he wasn't telling everything either. That night, snow turned to freezing rain. Briggs stood outside the precinct smoking a cigarette she wouldn't finish, staring at the wet reflections of red and blue lights in the puddles. She thought about Madison's message. Plans changed again. It had never sounded right. Too flat, too mechanical. What if Madison never sent that text at all? She rushed back inside, pulling the evidence file. The phone had been wiped before being recovered, but metadata logs showed one last outgoing message at 8:12 p.m. The device had connected through a different cell tower, one closer to the town limits, not Cedar Hollow. The phone had been moving when that message went out. Someone else had it. In the following days, the investigation widened. Briggs requested Vaughan's past records, looking for any connection that could explain how he'd ended up in Silver Lake that week. Buried in the data was a traffic ticket from 5 months earlier, same county, same highway, and on the citation line for vehicle owner, one name appeared that froze her mid-sentence. Jeff Turner, a known petty criminal, recently released, and the same name that had once surfaced in Ryan's early circle of friends, a mechanic who'd borrowed money from Madison's father and never paid it back. Suddenly, the missing link wasn't so missing. The pieces fell together quietly, almost anticlimactically, as truth often does. Turner had worked odd jobs with Vaughn during a construction stint. He'd owned a dark sedan. He'd disappeared a week after the murder. The theory was taking shape. Turner broke into the house first, searching for money. Madison came home unexpectedly. Vaughn arrived later, saw Turner leaving, went inside, and chaos followed. It wasn't planned murder. It was collateral coincidence. Two criminals crossing paths, one crime buried under another. But proving it would take months. And in that time, Ryan Cooper would still wake up every morning to the buzz of a tracker on his ankle and the eyes of a town that refused to forgive. When Briggs visited him one last time, she brought no files, no recorder. Just news. "They'll drop the charges next week," she said softly. "DNA cleared you. The gun wasn't yours. It's over." Ryan stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, not with joy, but disbelief. "Over. You think this ends?" Briggs didn't answer. She knew he was right. Some cases never ended. They just stopped being headlines. She left the apartment quietly. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, thin and drifting like ash in the streetlight. Her reflection glimmered faintly in a store window, tired, worn, but resolute. Behind her, the red taillights of passing cars smeared into streaks of color, fading like memory. In voiceover, her words settled into the silence. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just tells you how much time you've already lost finding it. And with that, the case of Madison Hale finally slipped into history. Not solved cleanly, not closed neatly, but understood. Winter loosened its grip on Silver Lake, but the town didn't thaw with it. The snow was gone, yet the air still carried the hush of something unfinished, like the echo of a sound that refused to fade. For Detective Laura Briggs, silence wasn't peace. It was memory. And memory, in a town like this, had a way of haunting you long after the case file was closed. It had been 2 months since Derek Vaughan's arrest and Ryan Cooper's release. The news headlines had faded, replaced by fresh scandals and tragedies from somewhere else. Silver Lake wanted to forget, to move on. But Briggs couldn't. Something about Vaughan's final words in that interrogation, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," still echoed in her head. It wasn't remorse she'd heard in his voice. It was confusion, as if he'd stumbled into a story that wasn't his to begin with. She'd seen hundreds of criminals lie, deflect, and perform, but this was different. Vaughn looked like a man who'd carried someone else's guilt, and she couldn't let that rest. At her desk, Briggs flipped through the file again. The grainy photographs, the timelines, the printed text messages, the GPS logs. The pattern was clear enough for anyone who wanted to stop at good enough. But detectives like her didn't stop at that. Every crime had ripples, and she could still feel one moving beneath the surface. She turned to a note in the margin, something she'd written weeks ago. Find out where the phone really was at 8:12 p.m. Madison Hale's last message, plans changed again, had been sent from outside Cedar Hollow. The phone signal had pinged off a tower near Route 42, the same route Vaughan's truck had taken later that night. But the timing didn't match. The phone had been on the move before Vaughn even arrived. Briggs drove out along Route 42 that afternoon, sunlight glinting off the melting snow. The fields were barren now, the trees skeletal against the horizon. She passed the spot where Madison's car had been found months earlier, the shoulder near Pinewood Reserve, where everything had started to unravel. She pulled over, stepping out into the chill wind. The air was thin and empty, carrying nothing but the faint rustle of dry grass. Then she noticed something new. A utility pole about 50 feet from the roadside, its lower section recently replaced. The wood was fresh, lighter in color, the nails clean. She walked closer, crouched, and noticed faint scuff marks on the frozen dirt nearby. Tire impressions, small ones. A car that had stopped there, maybe even turned around. She took a photo and logged the coordinates. Something about this spot felt wrong. If Madison's phone had been tossed from a car, this was where it would have happened. Back at the precinct, Briggs pulled up cell tower data again. She compared the timestamps, the outgoing message at 8:12 p.m., the first cash withdrawal at 10:07 p.m., and the second the following morning. Her screen filled with overlapping points, but one stood out. Between 7:58 and 8:17 p.m., a second mobile device had connected to the same tower, using a prepaid SIM card registered under a false name, Jeff Turner. There it was again, the ghost from Part 5, the name that had haunted the margins of every report. Turner hadn't been seen since the night of the murder. The police assumed he'd skipped town. Briggs was no longer convinced. She ran the number again through regional networks. This time, it hit a rental listing in Fond du Lac County, a small mechanic shop owned by an older couple. She called. The woman who answered hesitated when Briggs mentioned Turner. He used to rent the back garage, she said finally. Left some junk behind when he moved. Why? He in trouble again. Briggs's voice stayed steady. Just following up on an old file. Could I stop by tomorrow? Sure, if you think there's something worth seeing. The next morning, the drive out was long and empty. Highway lines blurred beneath grey clouds and half-frozen rain. The shop sat off a narrow road, peeling paint, rusted signs, the smell of oil and cold metal. Inside the garage, the owner handed her a box of Turner's leftovers, spare car parts, receipts, and a small black notebook coated in dust. Briggs flipped through it slowly. Most pages were filled with mundane notes, tire sizes, phone numbers, tool orders. Then, toward the back, a list caught her eye, dates and initials. The last two entries made her stop.
11/12 MH.
11/14 DV. Her pulse quickened. Where'd you say he went after he left? She asked. The owner scratched his head. Said he got a delivery job in Minnesota. Never called again. Briggs drove back in silence, the windshield wipers clicking a slow rhythm against the glass. Madison's initials. Vaughan's initials. This wasn't random. It was record-keeping. A list. She pulled over at a rest stop, opened her laptop, and searched for past missing persons reports in the counties along Vaughan's routes. Within minutes, she found one, a young woman from Dunn County, gone without a trace 3 months before Madison. Her name, Melissa Harker.
MH.
The connection was no longer a coincidence. That night, Briggs met with the district attorney. You're saying Vaughan didn't plan this alone, he said skeptically. I'm saying he might not have planned it at all, Briggs replied. Turner used him, or worked with him. Either way, the pattern fits. The rope, the method, even the geography. The DA leaned back in his chair. Laura, Vaughan's already confessed. He confessed to what he thought happened, she shot back. He walked into a setup. Madison's door wasn't open by chance. Someone made sure of it. He sighed, rubbing his temples. You can't open this case again on a hunch. Briggs stood. Then I'll find proof that isn't one. For the next week, she combed through Turner's financial history, tracing small payments, cash deposits, prepaid cards, and wire transfers that all led to one post office box in a nearby town. She coordinated with postal inspectors, and within days, they confirmed it. The box had been accessed just last month. Turner was alive. On a grey March morning, officers set up surveillance near the location. Hours passed. Then, around noon, a man in a dark hoodie approached the box, opened it, and slid a key inside. Briggs watched through binoculars. The face was older now, thinner, but unmistakable. She gave the signal. The takedown was quick, clean. When they searched his truck, they found a GPS unit with saved routes labeled CH and SL, Cedar Hollow and Silver Lake. Back at the station, Turner said little. When confronted with a notebook, he smirked. You think I killed her? He said. I didn't pull the trigger. Briggs didn't respond right away. She simply placed a photo of Madison on the table beside Melissa Harker's. No, she said softly. But you opened the door. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he replied, Doesn't matter who started it. Nobody remembers the man who unlocked the door, only the one who walked through. Weeks later, as spring broke across the lake, Briggs stood outside the station, the wind carrying the scent of thawing earth. Vaughn was serving life, Turner was awaiting trial, and Ryan Cooper, finally free, had left town. Silver Lake had gone still again. But sometimes, when Briggs drove past the shoreline, she'd slow down and look at her own reflection in the water, a faint blur of face and sky. Because in every case, no matter how far it went, some part of her always stayed behind, caught between the echoes of what was solved and the shadows of what never could be. In her final report, she wrote one line that summed it all up. Justice doesn't erase what happened. It only teaches you to live with the echo. And as the camera panned over the lake, calm and endless beneath a silver dawn, her voice closed the story, steady, weary, but certain. We call them cases. But they're never really closed.